Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1306 under Committee Report number 31.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senate Bill number 1306 under Committee Report number 31 is, the consideration thereof is hereby resumed.
Mr. President, this is the measure creating the Philippine Boxing Commission. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we are in the period of interpellation. So I move to recognize the sponsor, Chairman of the Committee on Sports, Senator Manny Pacquiao, and to interpellate Senator Zubiri.
Is there any objection? Senator Pacquiao as sponsor is recognized, and Senator Zubiri to interpellate is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this being a friendly interpellation to my kababayan, our colleague from Mindanao, Senator Manny Pacquiao. We all know, Mr. President, that the honorable sponsor is an expert in the field of boxing, being that his whole life was dedicated to the sport, and that if there's anyone in this chamber that has a full knowledge of this proposal, Mr. President, is the gentleman from Sarangani. I'd just like to ask the sponsor, what is the purpose of creating a boxing commission, Mr. President? The whole purpose, because right now we have the GAB, if I'm not mistaken, the Games and Amusements Board. What is the purpose of creating this other agency, Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity to explain the purpose of this bill. The purpose of this bill is to strengthen the boxing industry in our country, to protect the boxers. We know that boxing is not an easy sport, so that's the main purpose of this bill, Mr. President.
So really to strengthen the boxing industry, Mr. President, because I know for a fact after lengthy conversations with the honorable sponsor last week, I happened to mention to him that our region of Mindanao are boxing crazed people. They love boxing. Pati sa fiesta, araw, may boxing yun. Amateur boxing, professional boxing, nakapanood pa nga ako na transgender boxing. Kasi ano tayo eh, we're LGBT friendly. So pati boxing, meron transgender boxing. I've seen it in my province. It's quite interesting. So I agree with the sponsor, Mr. President, that we need a commission that is focused on this sport of boxing, which is loved by our people all over the country, from Apari to Holo, Mr. President. But I noticed, Mr. President, in the bill, and I'll be short about this because I really want this measure to pass for our Filipino boxers. But I noticed in the measure, Mr. President, that the compensation is only 8,000 pesos, I believe, for the members of the board. It's a really small amount for the chairman's salary. Is this practical, Mr. President? I'd like to ask the sponsor if this is practical.
Mr. President, that's not a problem with me. We can increase the allowance or salary of the chairman if that possible. Anytime we can increase it, and also the board members on board.
So, Mr. President, before I end my interpellation and support of the measure, I'd like to acknowledge in the gallery two of our world champions and famous boxers who's brought honor to our country. Jerry Peñalosa and Onyok Velasco is here in the gallery right now, Mr. President. And it's been a joy and pleasure to watch them fight for our country. I'm sure they're here today to support the measure of the good gentleman from Sarangani. That's all, Mr. President. I don't have any further questions for the sponsor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. President, may we recognize the President Pro Tem, Senator Franklin Drillon, to interpellate.
Senator Drillon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, let us state on record that we are supporting this measure and we congratulate Senator Pacquiao for having taken the initiative of crafting this measure and submitting it for the consideration of the chamber. So it is in that sense, Mr. President, that we ask the gentleman from Sarangani and General Santos to yield the floor to a few questions.
It's my pleasure, Mr. President.
Mr. President, as we said, this is a laudable measure, and the gentleman from Sarangani has stated and has spread into the record the purpose of this measure. Mr. President, first, what is the present setup that we propose to change with this measure?
The present setup is, Mr. President, is like I said, strengthening the boxing industry, and also not only that, but also utilize the sport as a source of revenue, and also to make sure that our boxers will proper, handled and has protection for any accident. We know that boxing is very is a difficult sport.
Ang ating pong tinatanong, ano po ang pagkakaiba noong Philippine Boxing Commission na ating ibig ibuo sa pamamagitan ng ano ba sa ngayon? Sino ba ang governing body?
The governing body, Mr. President, is the GAB, Games and Amusement Board. But GAB is handling all sports. I mean, everything, gambling, sports, and I want to basketball, any sports. And I want to create this boxing commission for the purpose is to protect the boxers and focus only in boxing, just to protect them and give them proper protection.
Should we not also protect the other athletes? For example, we have provided for benefits here. Yung ibang atleta po, hindi ba pwedeng dapat isama rin dito?
Pwede rin man po, pero ito ay exclusive lamang para sa boxing industry. We know that in boxing, yan lang ang tanging paraan natin na, one of the sports na pwede tayo magipag-compete all over the world.
Sa ating saligang batas po, mayroong prinsipyong dapat pantay-pantay tayo lahat, or equal protection of the law. At hindi po pwede na sabihin natin ang isang atleta ay ibubukod at bigyan ng special attention, at yung ibang atleta similarly situated ay walang protection. Meron po tayong equal protection of the law na nakalagay po sa ating saligang batas, specifically sa ating Bill of Rights. Nakalagay po, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall any person be denied the equal protection of the laws. Ang akin po, nababahala po ako na kung sabihin natin ang boxer lamang ang entitled dito sa mga benepisyo at dapat bigyan ng proteksyon, baka po lumabag sa ating saligang batas dahil wala po tayong binibigay na proteksyon at benepisyo doon sa ibang atleta. Yun po ang prinsipyo na dapat natin talakayin. At itong prinsipyo ito ay isang sangayon po sa ating saligang batas at pwede pong masabi na maging ang konstitusyon ng batas natin kung exclusively para lamang sa athletes. I'm sorry, sa boxers.
ito po ay unang hakbang lamang dahil especially I'm a boxer. Unang hakbang lamang to, hindi lamang kumbaga I'm not saying that this is only for boxing, but I'm thinking about other sports, hindi lang pero hindi tayo makakausad kung hindi natin umpisahan. So saan tayo mag-umpisa dito sa boxing? If we can after this, if we can do something for another sports like basketball or tennis or anything, pwede po rin po tayong gumawa din ng hakbang ng bill para po sa kanila. Pero sa ngayon, itong boxing muna ang naisip ko na i-create. And after that, pwede namang mag-create din ng ibang commission din para din sa mga ibang atleta na hindi lamang boxing.
Very laudable, Mr. President, except that our Constitution provides for the equal protection at dapat lahat po na atleta na similarly situated ay dapat makasama dito sa panukalang batas. Halimbawa po, si Hedelin Diaz, bakit po hindi kasama sa weightlifting? Bakit po sila hindi kasama dito yung weightlifters?
Ito po ay boxing lamang.
Kaya nga po, boxing lamang. Ang sinasabi ko, bakit hindi natin isama ang ibang athletes? Dahilan po sa ating saligang batas, dapat lahat po pantay-pantay tayo or equal protection of the law. At kung may benepisyo po para sa boxer at importante po ang benepisyo para sa boxer, dapat yung ibang athletes din ay dapat mabigyan ng benepisyo at hindi po pwedeng sasabihin natin, umpisa lang yan. Kaya lahat po ay dapat pag-isipan din natin yung sila Efren Bata Reyes. Bakit hindi sa World Pole Champions dito? Sila Francisco Bustamante, si Renato Alcano, si Dennis Orculio, yung mga track and fields legends po natin, kagaya ni Lydia De Vega, si Elma Moros. Bakit po hindi sila sakop dito sa benepisyong ito?
Under po sila ng GAB at tiwala naman tayo sa GAB na pinapatupad nila yung tama. Pero ito kasing boxing na sinasabi natin is napakadelikado na sports. No, sa aking pagbuboxing, makita ninyo ako, buhay ako dito, pero ilan ang kasama ko na namatay sa larangan ng boxing. Since then, so
yun pong martial arts, ganun din, hindi po ba? Yung martial arts, mayroon ding danger yan sa life and limb of the athlete. Siya ba hindi kasama rito?
lahat po ng sports na yan ay under ng yung mga binabanggit nyo is nasa sa Games and Amusement Board.
Oo nga, pero yung mga boxers, ganun din Under din sila ng Games and Amusement Bakit sila hinihiwalay?
Yes, Mr. President, under sila ng Games and Amusement Board, but like I said, na ito ay mahirap na isa sa pinakamahirap na sports at pinakadelikado dahil marami pong namamatay pag hindi maganda at naayos at protektado sila sa namamahala nito.
Sang-ayon po kami diyan na talaga po mahirap ang sports na ito. In fact, we congratulate the good sponsor for having achieved so much and having brought honor to our country. But here we are talking about the equal protection. Yung pantay-pantay po dapat tayo sa ilalim ng batas. Yun po ang prinsipyo sa ating saligang batas. Kaya siguro yung mga kung ano man ang panganib na hinaharap ng isang boxer, ganun din ang panganib na hinaharap ng isang martial arts athlete.
Mr.
Hindi
President.
po ba? Or judo, ganun din po.
Mr. President, with the permission of the two gentlemen, may I offer an interjection, Mr. President? With the
Please,
permission.
yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. President, the other sports, amateur sports, have a commission, the Philippine Sports Commission. The boxing is a very peculiar situation. It is the only sport wherein there is a amateur and professional in one. And that is their problem with the Games and Amusement Board, Mr. President. The GAB is only for professional boxing. And so I think that is the reason that this commission is being created, Mr. President, to give that. Besides, there is indeed the fact that the boxing is only one of the very few sports where the Filipino will excel worldwide, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. But let me reiterate that under our system, under our Constitution, the standard is there should be no material difference between the classifications. I'm sorry, I take that back. In order to have a valid classification, there must be a material difference between one and the other situation. Halimbawa po, yun pong boxing at saka professional combat sport like martial arts. Mixed martial arts.
MMA.
Yeah, the mixed martial arts. Pareho po ang risk involved
That's correct.
between a mixed martial art and a boxer. And therefore, we cannot validly make a class of the boxer without including the mixed martial arts athlete. Otherwise, you suffer from a constitutional infirmity of the equal protection of the law being violated. Pareho po yan eh. Ang prinsipyo po ng ating Bill of Rights, kung those who are of the same class must be treated similarly. And we are saying that maybe the others, yung mga athletes, hindi, there can be a valid classification. But insofar as professional combat sport is concerned, wala pong valid distinction that we can think of in order to exclude the professional, combat sports. That is the basis of the classification under the law and under the Constitution, Mr. President.
Mr. President, perhaps let's find out if Senator Pacquiao can answer my question of whether mixed martial arts is recognized by the Philippine Sports Commission or by the the GAB. I know that it is not it's not part of the program of the Philippine Sports Commission. It does not have a national body governing it, so it's completely different. While in the case of boxing, if we're talking of equal protection, boxing is not equally protected right now because the Philippine Sports Commission is only on amateur sports and does not have anything to do with professional sports. And boxing is a premier professional sport, Mr. President. That is the difference. So perhaps we can try to find the middle ground on the point being raised by the President pro tem, so that we can solve that predicament, based on the perspective that he is putting forth, Mr. President.
MMA and full contact sports is a relatively new sport, and possibly it is still unregulated in the Philippines, so we're pointing out a possible loophole in our present laws right now. Depends on the hearing or the research of Senator Pacquiao.
Mr. President, bago lang kasi yung MMA at saka itong taekwondo.
UFC, etc.
Ay, UFC, bago lang po yan. Boxing, yan ang boxing is...
Unfortunately, Mr. President, the principle of equal protection of the law does not take into account whether or not a sport is new or it is old. That would not be a reasonable classification of boxing as a sport distinct from mixed martial arts. And here, in this bill, Mr. President, we even exclude amateur boxing. In other words, an amateur boxer is not entitled to the benefits. Is that correct? He's not entitled to the benefits. Huh? Under the bill, he's entitled to certain benefits like field health coverage, like pension, survivorship. So there are benefits that a professional boxer gets, which is denied to the amateur boxer, which to my mind has no basis.
Mr. President.
But the amateur boxing is under the Philippine Sports Commission, so all of that are available to them.
Yes. Mr. President, the fact that one activity is under the supervision of one body is not a valid ground to classify the activity as being distinct.
Mr. President, the amateur boxing, there's a law of amateur boxing.
Mr. President, may I add to the discussion?
What's the pleasure of Senator Zubiri?
With the permission of, just to add to the discussion with Senator Drillon, because I used to, if it's all right with Senator Drillon, I used to be a manager of the Philippine Bukidnon Amateur Boxing Association. I was the representative of ABAP for Bukidnon. When it comes to amateur boxing, Mr. President, there are rules and guidelines given by the Philippine Sports Commission and the NSA, the National Association on Boxing, which is basically the ABAP. That is the Amateur Boxing Association of the Philippines. You're not allowed to give out prize money. You're not allowed, kasi pag may prize money na po, nagiging professional na po siya. It's not anymore under the supervision. It will not be anymore under the supervision of ABAP. They will actually lose their entity as amateurs once they get certain remunerations. I believe
when they retire, they're no longer engaged in this sport.
If they are champions, we have a law, and part of the law that we passed, which is basically for winners of the SEA Games, Asian Games, and Olympics, we give them, if they are winners, bronze, silver, and gold, they have a particular prize from government, or not prize money, but reward, but they also have a monthly stipend after that. They're given actually a monthly allowance, but they have to be winners of this particular sports events. With professional boxing, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, to Honorable Senator Drillon, the problem is the unregulated boxing matches in the provinces, in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, wherein some of these people are paid only 200, 300 pesos, minsan short-changed pa. It's supposed to be paid 1,000 per fight, binibigyan ng promoter 200 lang. I remember the case of, who is that? Luisito Espinosa, who had a boxing match in South Cotabato. He was not paid. The poor guy had to go to court. He was paid after 10 years. And Gab was really not much help to the gentleman. So I understand the plight of Senator Manny Pacquiao, that in this particular case, if the new commission will be focused on the plight of professional boxers, meron silang matatakbuhan po na ahensya that will help them out. And I hope that that answers the question, because yung UFC po is a new sport, and I think it's still considered amateur. The ones that are being fought here are still considered amateur fights, the URCC, not the ones in the US. The US, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Nevada Boxing Commission, I believe, also regulates the UFC in the United States, if I'm not mistaken. But with amateur sports, Mr. President, it's a whole different ball game. In other words, under NSA's po yan and PSC.
With all due respect to the gentleman from Bukidnon, Mr. President, that is not the issue we are raising. The issue we are raising is that under our Constitution, the Equal Protection of the Law Clause, there must be a valid distinction in order to treat a class differently from the others. And what we're saying is that we seriously doubt whether there is a valid classification here in order to be able to defend the bill from on the grounds of constitutionality. That's all that we're saying, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
If we're willing to suspend our interpretation, and if the sponsor can give us a paper to to assert, to defend this particular point, we're willing to do that, Mr. President, just so we will not drag the other, a number of other items in the agenda. We can suspend this first, and then we can, we're willing to get a review and or get an enlightenment from the sponsor on this particular point.
Mr. President, in amateur, Mr. President, there's Republic Act 10699 giving incentives to all amateur athletes, including coaches. It's already a law na nagbibigay ng mga insentibo sa ating mga atleta, sa mga ating mga amateur. So hindi tayo nag-create ng bago, kundi ang boxing commission, itong boxing commission, ang boxing is existing na doon sa Games and Amusement Board, isi-separate lang po natin yung boxing commission. And also yung regulation at saka yung racing horse, yung Philippine Racing Horse Commission, may na-separate din yon. So what I'm talking about is this Philippine Boxing Commission, hindi ito bago, kundi sinipilit lang natin sa Games and Amusement Board.
That is not the issue, Mr. President, I'm sorry. But we are saying that, what we are saying in fact is that there is no material difference in the risks involved between boxing and professional mixed martial arts as to put professional boxers on its own class. That's the long and short of our position, of our theory. So that is why, if the gentleman sponsor can give us a memo that this bill does not violate this particular provision, then we can accept that.
What's the pleasure of Senator Ejercito? Yes.
Just with the permission of the gentleman, as a co-author, no? Boxing is distinct in such a way, Mr. President, that it's a very fatal sport, no?
It's a
it's a fatal sport.
Fatal.
Yes, it's a deadly sport and it's a dangerous sport that it could be fatal. And there are a lot of boxing. There are a lot of boxers who died after a fight.
So, sir, a professional mixed martial arts match can also be as dangerous.
Yes, Mr. President, but mixed martial arts, UFC, in particular, just gained popularity just in the recent years.
That's not material, whether or not
Just
one
in the
has
recent years.
gained popularity. What we are talking about are the similarity of the risk involved between boxing and mixed martial arts.
Gentlemen, I hope
Mr. President.
my interjection earlier would not be misinterpreted. I was not really answering the constitutional objection. I was highlighting the fact that we need to look into professional MMA or contact sports because they may still be unregulated at the current setup, under the current setup.
So,
that's a good point.
Should we regulate them?
That's
No,
a
Mr.
good
President.
point raised by Senator Drillon in the course of the interpellation. That's a very good point.
Mr. President, it grieves my heart to disagree. Mixed martial arts is not recognized yet. It's not even recognized by POC. Much more IOC. It's completely different from boxing. We cannot compare it with boxing because, for all you know, it can be declared illegal in the future.
Yes, sir, but we're holding matches in the Philippines, so that's why.
Yes, but,
who regulates those matches? So I think that's a
it's
question that we should
unrecognized.
ask.
It's unrecognized at the moment, Mr.
So
President.
unregulated.
So, yes,
Yes.
perhaps that is the issue that we should look into. Find a way to regulate that particular sport. But in my case, I will not endorse that sport. It's not even recognized by the International Olympic Committee, Mr. President. It's not a sport. Right? There's no difference between the street fights, illegal street fights, like comparing it to sabong, yung mga tupada. Ganun yun eh. So, I don't dare touch it, Mr. President, at this point. But nevertheless, perhaps Senator Pacquiao may be able to present to the President Pro Tem an explanation or position that will answer his query. So with the permission of the two gentlemen at this point, may I suspend the session for a while, Mr. President?
Motion to suspend. Is there any objection? There being none, session is suspended.